Hello, everyone, and welcome on in to a new show we're calling Trump 2.0 here on CBN News on our YouTube channel and, of course, on our podcast feed. And I'm your host, John Stolnis, for this, and we are going to be taking a look at the second Trump administration. You know, we're going to be every week coming to you with a look at what's been going on that past week with the Trump administration, because I mean, really, Washington, D.C. now, that's what we're going to be talking about for these next 4 years. Everything is going to be done through the Trump lens, it would seem. And so we're going to objectively analyze everything going on in the Trump administration and surrounding D.C., because Trump 2.0 is going to have a hand in virtually everything coming down the pike over these next 4 years. And joining me on this journey, David Brody, CBN News chief political analyst, and Dan Andros, who is one of the hosts of the CBN News podcast, Quick Start. Gentlemen, Trump 2.0 is just about here. We're just a couple of days away from inauguration. How you guys doing?
Oh, doing great.
Yeah.
And then we'll see what happens when it starts.
Yeah. Right now, it's just the lead up. And but I will tell you, this transition has been exceedingly active, and especially over these last couple of days here, because we certainly got some welcome news this week. There seems to be a peace agreement between Israel and Hamas brokered by the Biden and incoming Trump administrations, it would appear. Now, as we're recording this, you know, the Israeli government, I don't think, has yet officially confirmed the deal. There was still some last minute things that they were potentially haggling about. But it looks, for all the world, all indications are that there is a peace agreement between Israel and Hamas, which will result in the release of some hostages right away. It's a temporary ceasefire, but with the idea that it's going to extend well into the future here. And it's really been interesting, David, how this has all come about. You've had some of Trump's envoys, his Middle East envoy, the person who's going to be his Middle East envoy. Trump hasn't even taken office yet, but he's been working with the Biden administration, with Biden officials in the Middle East, helping to broker this deal. I know a lot of people are talking about who gets credit for this, who doesn't get credit for this. David, I think at the end of the day, one thing we can say is that it seems as though these two rivals, these teams that generally speaking don't get along, work together in this case.
Yeah, no, they definitely did. And in terms of who's getting credit for it, well, let's not take your word, my word, or Dan's word for it. Let's take the State Department, Biden's State Department, who came out and said Donald Trump's team gets a whole bunch of credit for this. And if it weren't for them, probably wouldn't have any sort of deal. So, I mean, that's Biden's State Department. Now, it's not Biden, but maybe you should talk to his State Department because there was not an on message going forward on that. Look, there's a lot to say about this deal. I mean, like, can I put my analysis cap on here for a quick second? It was a horrible deal. It's a terrible deal. And, you know, Donald Trump, first of all, let's step back. This wouldn't have even happened, clearly, if Donald Trump wasn't coming into the Oval Office. So the Trump effect is real. And let's also be clear, once this deal, if it does take effect, under Donald Trump's watch, I think the Middle East is actually relatively going to be somewhat quieter than we saw during the Biden years. So, and why? Because the thing that they respond to over there in the Middle East is strength. And Donald Trump has tons of it, maybe sometimes too much of it, but he's got it. And that's why I think things will be calm. But here's why this deal is bad. Because remember, in 2011, Yahya Sinwar, who of course has led Hamas and now is dead, he was part of a prisoner swap back in 2011. Remember the Israeli soldier at the time, his name is escaping me, I should know. It was a very famous case, but the Israelis traded the Israeli soldier for many of these Palestinian prisoners. Yahya Sinwar was one of them at the time. He became Hamas's leader. Now, of course, he's dead. The point is, where is the next Yahya Sinwar here? Because this deal says, okay, you get some of the hostages back, but in exchange, you're going to have a lot of Palestinian prisoners go back to Gaza. Now, to be clear, women, children mostly at first, but eventually the men, the terrorists, and I say the terrorists, yeah, convicted terrorists, ones that have sworn allegiance against Israel, would be sent back to Gaza. So this is just it makes no sense. Why? I mean, I guess to a degree it makes sense in the sense that Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure to bring these hostages home. Having said that, let's be clear. This idea that there's going to be X amount of hostages returned, look, some of them are dead. according to Israel. The IDF says that. So I'm not convinced that this is going to help at all. We haven't even talked about the fact that Israel is going to kind of withdraw to a degree from Gaza temporarily. And once again, I know it's in stages. I understand all the caveats, but this is just a really bad deal. And here's the other thing. I mean, Trump's going to say victory, victory, victory. The problem is, am I mistaken? And I'm being facetious here and a bit rhetorical, but did he not say all hell would break loose in the Middle East if, wait for it, all the hostages were not returned by Inauguration Day? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. All the hostages are not going to be returned. So he's claiming he's going to claim credit, but it didn't happen the way he wanted. He's going to get some. And by the way, there are 3 Americans that are over there now. There were originally 7. These are American Israeli citizens here. There were originally 7. They believe 4 have passed and are dead, but there are 3. 2 would be released in this first batch. 1 the second phase. So not all 3 Americans are going to be released even on the first go round. So I know I've said a lot, or who knows what I've actually said now that I think about it. But the point is that this is where we're at, and this idea, Dan, that it's one president at a time. Well, Trump's thrown that out the window because that's not happening. This is really, really not even unique. It's unprecedented in American history that this is happening, where you have 2 presidents, one president in waiting, doing something like this. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah, that was going to be my first observation before getting into the details. You brought up a lot of them on the deal itself. Is just this dynamic of, is Trump like acting president right now? It's so bizarre that he's even involved in this, and I'm not even necessarily saying that's a bad thing. Maybe it is a good thing that the 2 of them are working together in the midst of this in some capacity. But it is just very odd. I don't recall ever seeing something like this, especially on such a big deal like what's going on in Israel right now. And to your point on the deal, it's a tough spot because you have to do something to go forward on this and try to get these hostages home. But any ceasefire, any stopping of any sort of fighting at all, really is just a way to say to Hamas, we're going to regroup and we're going to start fighting again. I mean, they have proven time and time again that they have no interest in peace. This is not something that they want. They want to wipe Israel off the map. So it's this almost impossible spot that Israel is in. And look, and to your point on Trump and looking ahead at this administration coming in, we can look back at the last time, and the Abraham Accords was really one of the more impressive achievements of the first Trump administration. Really, some groundbreaking things were happening in the Middle East. Certainly not a bunch of wars like we're seeing right now. And you had people like Saudi Arabia coming to the table. You had people who had previously said they want to wipe Israel off the map, actually coming to the negotiating table and talking, how can we go forward and build our economies and not have these sorts of conflict. So hopefully this is a first step, even if it's a frustrating one, in that direction towards another Abraham Accords. That's what Trump said in one of his statements online, that he was trying to build on that.
And John, just a quick note to that, because Dan made a great point, astute one, about Saudi Arabia. Let's be clear. Trump knows the deal. He wants Abraham Accords on steroids this time, and that's going to be a normalization of relationships between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I guarantee you, and this is a storyline we need to watch for here on CBN, this idea that Saudi Arabia wants that war with Hamas and Israel to end. And that, listen, are you going to see that in writing anywhere? No, but it's going to be back channel. And so Trump is well aware that this war needs to end for a lot of reasons, including if he wants relationship normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel, art of the deal, right? He's got to get that war to end, even if it means Israel isn't necessarily getting the best deal. So that's something to keep in mind here.
Yeah, the reporting is that it really was the Trump team that was pressuring Israel to kind of move forward on some of the things that they were reluctant to do when it was just the Biden administration who was pushing for this deal. And this is really essentially the deal that was proposed back in May that just seems the different parties were kind of pushed to it now with the specter of Donald Trump taking office on Monday. And it kind of reminds me, and this is maybe dumb, but it reminds me of a West Wing episode where, you had a fictional battle between China and Kazakhstan coming to a head at the end of the Bartlett term or whatever. And the new guy who was going to come in essentially was playing bad cop during back channels, trying to convince both sides to get a deal done now because it's going to be harder once I'm in office. And that to me strikes a little bit similar to kind of what we're seeing here is you had Donald Trump come out very forcefully. And like you said, David, saying like all hell's going to break loose if we don't get all the hostages back. Like you said, that's not the deal in place, but it is a deal. And it appears to have been authored by the specter of a Trump second term in which maybe conditions would have been less favorable for Hamas and maybe even for Israel, because we know that Trump is America first. This deal, I don't think, was really done with the idea of it being Israel first or Hamas first. Like, certainly it benefits the United States for there to be a normalization of relations with Israel and with Saudi Arabia. So a lot of what Donald Trump has been doing, I think, can be viewed through the America First lens, can it not?
Yes. I mean, I think you made some really good observations for sure. I think the big concern here is what happens when Trump, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves, what happens when Trump leaves the stage? I mean, remember, this deal is a cauldron that it will percolate. And I guarantee you that Hamas is not going to all of a sudden try any stuff with Trump now because he's the strong man. The strong man's in town. What happens when America elects a potential would-be Neville Chamberlain, or someone that's really going to project weakness? Well, that's when they strike. Look at Crimea with Putin. Look at what happened in Ukraine just recently. Well, recently it's been over 2 years now. So, I mean, this is what folks do that want to take advantage of situations, Dan.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I just, as we're talking about this, then you talk about the new sheriff being in town, and I can't underscore that enough. I mean, I do think that's just going to be a big change that we see because Trump very much believes in projecting strength. And look, love him or hate him, if you are a foreign nation who's maybe an adversary to the United States, you just don't know if this guy's going to hit the button. I mean, right. He's not a big I love war guy, but I mean, look at Soleimani. I mean, you're just not going to feel safe walking around if you're trying to attack America's interests overseas. So, that has its advantages.
Such a great point. It's all part of the art of the deal. Keep them guessing, keep them off balance, be unpredictable. And some people will call him crazy. MAGA will call him crazy like a fox. It just depends on your vantage point. But the bottom line is, you're right, Dan. People are just world leaders are on edge as to what he's going to do. And those two words, on edge, that's all it takes to make America great again, as he would say.
Well, as we're ramping up for Trump 2.0 here, this week has seen a number of high-profile confirmation hearings before various Senate committees. We've seen President-elect Trump's pick for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have his moment in the sun on Tuesday. Pam Bondi has had 2 nomination hearings. Marco Rubio and a number of other cabinet officials have had hearings this week. And I want to jump off. Let's start with Hegseth here, David, because this, to me, was the most contentious that we've seen by far of any of the other confirmations. Not a surprise, given everything that we heard in the days when he was going up on Capitol Hill, meeting with Republican senators. And really, it felt as if his nomination, the chances of his nomination, hung on one Republican senator, Joni Ernst. And this week, it certainly appeared that after she heard his testimony during the confirmation hearing, that she was prepared to move forward. What does that mean for Hegseth's glide path to confirmation in the full Senate?
Well, just to be clear, you say the words certainly appeared. No, she has actually said she's going to vote for Hegseth. And so that's it. That's game, set, match. It's over. In other words, if Joni Ernst is on board, he'll get out of committee. The numbers are there. And once he's out of committee, he'll go to the floor and he'll have the votes. I mean, it's just that simple. So he will be confirmed. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Obviously, last second, the old asterisk and the caveat is, anything can happen at the last moment. But why did she do that? He handled himself really, really well. I mean, first of all, he's a great communicator, great orator. Some people will say he was duplicitous as it relates to walking back some of the women in combat stuff. For sure, he was trying to kind of walk a fine line there. There's no doubt about that. Having said that, he aced the exam. He was cool and calm. If I look up cool cucumber in the dictionary, not that there are pictures in the dictionary now that I think about it, but he would be right there with those cool cucumber maneuvers, because that's what they really were. They were coming after him. The Democrats were coming after him big time. And they would not stop. And rightly so. I mean, they've got their point of view. But he was just so calm under fire, and he didn't take the bait. And I think because of that, he didn't trip up, and because of that, he'll be confirmed.
Yeah, Dan, I think the thing for me, the only thing that for me I thought landed was because I mean we'd known about the affairs and all that kind of stuff, and he claimed an anonymous smear campaign against him. I think one of the areas that Democrats hit on that didn't have anything to do with that and is more central to his actual job was experience and knowledge of world affairs. He was asked a couple of questions. What is ASEAN? Who is in ASEAN? Didn't know the right answer for that. Didn't have the answer for a couple other questions that Democrats certainly thought that a defense secretary nominee should have the answers to. Was there any line of questioning that the Democrats brought forth that you thought were more troublesome for him? Do you agree with David that he really handled himself well?
I generally thought he handled himself fairly well. I do know that line of question you're talking about. I think Tammy Duckworth was one of the ones that went in on that and asked him the different types of agreements that could be negotiated and things of that nature. And I think he played that off fairly well because, if you don't know every single, to me, I don't know that it's necessarily crucial that he knows every in and out of every procedure in detail and which group is in. I mean, obviously there are key ones you've got to know, but I mean, these are things that he is going to obviously have advisors on and talk through and work through. And it's more about his general knowledge on the military, the issues that we're dealing with our neighbors across overseas and stuff. And I'm sure, from what I can tell, he's got a decent enough handle on those where I'm not super worried about the specifics. Now, maybe other people feel the same. But I tend to agree with David. I thought he handled himself fairly well. And, people are touting that outsider kind of line as sort of a positive, right? And so I don't, that was probably his weakest moment, I would say. Like, I mean, ideally you'd like to know all of those details and have all of those things buttoned up, but I don't know that it's enough to nuke it.
And if that was his weakest moment, his strongest moment was probably in the first 2 minutes of his opening statement, where he gave all credit to Jesus Christ, his Lord and Savior. He said, look, I'm not a perfect man. I've made mistakes, but no matter how all of this turns out, all credit to the Lord Jesus Christ. And I tell you what, look, you can believe what you want about Pete Hegseth. I mean, he's making the argument that he is a changed man from 2018 onward. That doesn't mean he's a perfect man from 2018, but a changed man. And the last time I checked, grace and compassion go with our faith. And so, look, the proof is in the pudding. The actions are actions, and there'll be consequences for those. But I thought it was powerful when he said that.
Yeah, and he also followed up after that, talking about how he wanted to revamp the Pentagon to really focus on effective warfighting, to make that the priority, as opposed to anything else that has been going on over the last 8 years or so. Like you guys said, it does seem as though he is going to get confirmed when it goes to the full Senate. Pam Bondi's testimony, I thought, was interesting as well. Not as contentious. It seemed to me, Dan, that most Democrats agree that she's qualified, that she has the requisite experience, that she knows the law. The issue surrounding her is, can she say no? Where does her loyalty lie? Will she go the way? And I think it was Senator Durbin who basically said there were two attorney generals, Bill Barr and Jeff Sessions, who stood up to Trump or did not do what Trump wanted, and they were on the outs and have been attacked ever since. Are you willing to go that route yourself if the president wants you to do something that is not within your purview? And that was really the line of questioning for Pam Bondi. How do you think she came out of her hearing?
I thought she did just fine. I thought she did really well, actually. And I think at times Democrats that were pressing her, to me, that was more like playing to the base, because they weren't even giving her in a lot of instances a chance to answer the questions. They just kept
Right.
saying, well, will you say no to Trump? Will you be able to say no to Trump? And then she's trying to answer the question and she's saying, my own person, I will, I'm not going to be forced to do things. I won't be bullied, et cetera, et cetera. And then they just kept talking. Oh, I'll take that as a no answer. And it's like, wait a minute, are you going to listen to the answer or not? So to me, as is the case often in these sorts of hearings, it felt like showboating, and we just want to get our clip out there where we're yelling at them and whatever else. Because I don't know that there's any evidence to suggest that she's not going to be able to be a person of principle. And, when Trump, or if Trump, were to cross a line of some sort, that she wouldn't be able to stand up to him in some way, shape, or form. I'm not really sure where they're getting that from. To me, it just feels like this is a talking point that Democrats want to get in print. And so that's what it felt like to me watching it.
I agree with Dan on all of that. And I'll just quickly say that I just thought that it was such a difference in terms of how she handled the committee compared to how Hegseth handled the committee. Hegseth really never went on the offense at all, or didn't. He really shouldn't have, based on a lot of the stuff that had happened in his life beforehand. So he held back. Bondi, on the other hand, didn't have any of the baggage that Hegseth had, so she had a little bit more, leeway to go ahead and push back, and she did. She pushed back quite often. The "I'm not going to be bullied" comment, I thought, stood out, like Dan said, and there were other parts with her and Adam Schiff going toe to toe. I mean, I thought that was fascinating. So anyhow, lots of interesting stuff. She'll be confirmed.
Yeah, and I'll just add this on Pam Bondi. I actually worked in a local talk radio in Tampa, Florida, back in the early 2000s, and she was a prosecutor back then in Hillsborough County. And so we used to have her on the show all the time. She's been doing this a long time. Like, she is very good at this. She knows what she's doing. Obviously, like you were saying, everyone's saying she's very qualified. But, I mean, I remember her even back then. That was the first time I'd heard of her. And hearing her on the show, she was good at this back then. So definitely well prepared.
Well, and let's finish up with two nominees who have not had their time before the Senate yet, and we're talking about RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. As of last check on Thursday morning, still no confirmation hearing dates have been set for either of those two candidates. And David, I wonder, is there a chance that there may not be nomination hearings for either of these two? Are they experiencing any bumps in the road right now? What are you hearing on RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard?
No, I'm not hearing anything to the contrary. In other words, it's just a matter of some paperwork and some dotting I's, crossing T's, and there might be more to the story. I guess we'll find that out as the days go on. But no, overall, no, they'll be on track. It's just going to be delayed a little bit. I don't see them getting. I see them getting confirmed. I really do. Yeah, are they controversial? Sure. Are there going to be contentious hearings? Yeah, yada yada yada. But ultimately, I think the one that would have actually, if it was going to be between Tulsi Gabbard and RFK, if one of them was not going to be confirmed, it would be Tulsi Gabbard. Now, she has walked back the 720 stuff, the FISA stuff, as it relates to surveillance. But I think that might be a bridge too far for certain traditional Republicans in terms of her views. She's trying to split the difference. That'll be tighter, but I still think she gets through.
Yeah, Dan, that's what. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think when we've seen both of these candidates seemingly make some capitulations a little bit. Tulsi Gabbard telling some senators who had a real problem with her stance on FISA authorization, quick wireless wiretapping for phone calls of American citizens, but outside the country as they're trying to listen in on conversations of terrorist targets or targets of opponents of the U.S. She's been against that, and now there have been some senators who've been trying to get her to walk that back a little bit. Seems like she has. RFK Jr. on vaccines. There's been some conversations. What vaccines are you against? What are you not against? These are some of the negotiations that take place in these side meetings when these folks are on Capitol Hill meeting with senators ahead of the nomination process. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on both of those guys as well.
Yeah, it's really going to be interesting because you have, and what I was going to ask David here is how contentious is he think this is going to be, because, Gabbard, a former Democrat, RFK Jr. is certainly not some staunch conservative, right? So, I mean, Tulsi's made more of a shift but neither one of these are like your Fox News, like, so to speak, conservatives, like in the Hegseth hearing, they're throwing out like, oh, you and your Fox News colleagues, that like, you can't really do that sort of vibe with these two. So that's the interesting thing to me, and that's why I was actually going to ask David, how contentious do you think Democrats are going to be with these two?
Oh, they're going to be very contentious with both of them. I think the more contentious hearing will be between RFK and Democrats. Because there's bad blood there. Let's remember, for a couple different reasons. One, Democrats try to get Democrat Party try to get RFK off the ballot many times, but that's kind of a subset. Beyond all of that, they have just real issues with RFK's stances. But here's why it'll be contentious, because RFK is extremely passionate and very knowledgeable when it comes to defending some, not all, some of his anti-vax comments and views. So I think he's going to mix it up a little bit with them. Now, having said that, Tulsi Gabbard, I know Tulsi Gabbard personally. She's a little bit more, how do I say it? It's a Hawaii surfboard, kind of a little bit laid back. I don't necessarily see her going toe to toe with Democrats, though. Believe me, she'll be ready with some one-liners and some zingers, but I don't think it'll be as contentious as the RFK one.
Well, the nomination process will continue, and on Monday, Washington, D.C. will be in for a spectacle that we get every 4 years when we have a new president-elect, Inauguration Day, and we'll be covering it for you throughout all of our CBN News platforms, on YouTube, on the news channels, on the app. So make sure that you're checking us out on Monday, as we'll have coverage on the 700 Club. We'll have a special inauguration special. I said special twice there in 5 words. That's special too. 11:30 Eastern time.
Very special. Very special.
It'll be very special. That's right. 11:30 Eastern time. We'll be doing a CBN News inauguration special, and then of course Faith Nation at the end of the day. We'll have a recap of everything that happened. So make sure to stay with us at CBN News for everything inauguration this coming Monday. Until then, gents, next week as we get ready for Trump 2.0 in the next few days. Dan Andros, David Brody, thank you so much for joining me today on Trump 2.0.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, John.